Good evening. Welcome. I'm Shane Stark for the League of Women Voters of Santa Barbara, the moderator of today's forum. The League of Women Voters, its Education Fund, and TVSB are sponsoring today's forum for the candidates for Santa Barbara County Sheriff Coroner. We hope this forum will inform you, the voters, of the candidates' views on issues of interest. The League does not support or oppose any candidate or political party. We thank you for joining us. We will have this video in both English and Spanish, and the video will be online at the TVSB TV website and the YouTube channel on the League of Women Voters of Santa Barbara website. We have explained the rules to our candidates, so let's get started. I thank our candidates for participating and briefly introduce them. Sheriff Bill Brown. Hello. Sheriff's Lieutenant Eddie Schway, and Sheriff's Lieutenant Brian Olmstead. We will start with an opening statement, and we will proceed in alphabetical order, starting with Sheriff Brown.
Hello, I am Sheriff Bill Brown, your sheriff. And for the past 11 years, I have provided steady, proven leadership. I hold a master's degree from USC in public administration, and I graduated from the Delinquency Control Institute, the Northwest Command College, and both the FBI's National Academy and Executive Institutes. I've served as the president of both the state police chiefs and sheriff's associations, working in Sacramento, advocating for legislation that protects public safety, that supports law enforcement, and that helps victims of crime. For the past 8 years, I've served on California's Mental Health Services Oversight and Accountability Commission, where I continue to work to reduce criminal justice involvement for the mentally ill. I recently chaired a committee that issued this report, Together We Can, something that is a toolkit and a roadmap for California counties. I've secured $80 million for a new, desperately needed North County jail. When deciding who you'll vote for on June the 5th, please consider who is supporting my reelection. I'm endorsed by more than 800 people, including Governor Jerry Brown, Senator Dianne Feinstein, Assemblymember Jordan Cunningham, Supervisor Steve Lavagnino, and a who's who of local leaders past and present. I'm also endorsed by my peers, the Santa Barbara County Law Enforcement Administrators and the District Attorney.
Lieutenant Schway.
First, I'd like to thank the League for putting on this forum and the community at home watching. I'm Lieutenant Eddie Schway. I've been a local law enforcement officer in this community for over 32 years. I have the experience, training, and energy to serve as your sheriff. I currently serve as the chief of Solvang and Buellton's police departments and oversee the law enforcement services for the Chumash Reservation. I've worked in every corner of this county as a deputy, a sergeant, a lieutenant, a patrol, SWAT, rural crime, the civil unit, courts, and administration. I have trained thousands of officers throughout my career in both the academy and in-service training. I'm supported by local leaders, including the Democratic Party, but the most important endorsement I'm looking for are the votes of the community on June 5th. I spearheaded the crisis intervention training for our agency, developed and ran youth programs for the community, and I've received awards for superior performance, community programs, and conflict resolution. In my 32 years, I've seen and done a lot. I'm convinced our offices can do better. I'm committed to accountability, community focus, and efficiency, and I'd be honored to earn your vote.
Thank you. Lieutenant Olmstead.
Thank you. I'm Lieutenant Brian Olmstead. Growing up in the county, I've worked in the sheriff's office for 28 years under 3 different sheriffs, working my way up to a management position. I've worked or managed virtually every division in our department, including narcotics, gangs, human trafficking, homicide, IV foot patrol, North and South County Patrol divisions. I've run the training bureau, and for the last 16 years, I have taught at the local law enforcement academy. Along the way, I earned a master's degree in business administration, graduated from the FBI National Academy and the Sherman Block Leadership Institute. I received the Narcotic Officer of the Year for the state of California, and I've also received various department awards. I have volunteered for Special Olympics, PTA, and for the last 8 years, I've been a Boy Scout Scoutmaster. I've served as the Emergency Management Liaison and Mutual Aid Coordinator, establishing excellent working relationships with all the county's law enforcement and fire departments, and established a positive relationship with other agencies. I am proud of our department's working relationship with first responders and the public, but that work needs to be improved at a higher level. We need a new leader who will listen, take responsibility, and cooperate with partner agencies and community organizations. As sheriff, I will focus on the issues here at home: preventing crime, improving response times, disaster preparedness, and meeting the needs of the mentally ill and people in crisis. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll start our questions, and we'll rotate who goes first. So Lieutenant Shui will get to go first on the first question, and it's on leadership. How will you improve the performance, operations, and morale of the Sheriff's Department?
Well, you know, I think leadership is about creating a place where people want to be. And you have to listen to people. You have to listen to people who work for the sheriff's office. You have to have the ability to know the people that work for you, know their strengths, know their weaknesses, be able to address the small things while they're small. And the other thing that I see as my philosophy in leadership is kind of a decentralized leadership style. So giving the employees the power to make some decisions at a lower level when you can afford to. And you know, we need to look at officer wellness programs at our agency, and we need to address the retention of valuable employees on the agency.
Lieutenant Olmsted.
With leadership, you need to lead from the front. Through the years, I've always led at the front, supported the people that have worked with me. I've made the decisions when we've needed to make decisions, but I've also encouraged the deputies working with me to make decisions, come up with ideas, and solve the problems at hand. As sheriff, I will encourage leadership development. We need to improve the amount of leadership development that we're doing within the department. We need to encourage training with leadership development. We need to develop the succession planning that will encourage other people to improve their leadership skills, and we need to develop everyone in the department to be able to solve the problems.
Thank you. And Sheriff Brown.
Well, thank you. In terms of the next term, what's going to be very important is to recruit and bring into our organization a sufficient number of deputies and custody deputies to not only take care of our current vacancies, but also to staff the new Northern Branch Jail that will open next summer. And we need to do that by recognizing that the current level of recruitment needs to be expanded, and we are in the process of doing that right now. We've established a recruitment team, a collateral recruitment team, by bringing people from all parts of the organization together to be involved in the recruitment of people coming into our organization. And they're going out into the community, to community colleges, to military bases, to schools, to talk to people and to let them know what it's like to work at the sheriff's office. And we've had a tremendous response internally, and we've got a very good reception when we've gone out into the community as well. It's also very, very important that we recognize that the new jail, when it opens, will improve greatly the conditions that our custody staff currently have to work in. They work currently in an antiquated, very crowded jail, and that jail is going to have some relief when it gets to the point that the new jail is open and we can transfer some of the inmates there, and we can do a lot more with inmates and make it a better environment for both them and the custody staff. And then lastly, it's important that we recognize that we provide quality training for our staff in terms of our succession.
Thank you. The next question, we'll start with Lieutenant Olmsted, and this question is about jails and the mentally ill, homeless, and addicted people who are in them. And the question is, what is the sheriff's responsibility regarding homeless, mentally ill, and addicted persons in county custody, and what, if any, specific changes do you support?
Unfortunately, nowadays, the jail has become the location where people suffering from mental illness, addiction problems have been placed based on not having enough funding for alternative housing locations. What we need to do is a couple things. One, we need to improve our budget, be more fiscally budgeted, so when we're spending our money, we're able to attribute some of that money to housing plans for the community, and also develop training for our deputies and custody deputies in the area of working with people with mental illness, and including out in the field where we teach them better law enforcement tactics to prevent them from going into the jail. We need to, for the last 16 years, I've been teaching at the Law Enforcement Academy people with disabilities and how to develop tactics in minimizing use of force with mentally ill, and also trying to find ways to get them further help in the mental health community.
Thank you. Sheriff Brown.
Well, thank you. Many of the answers to our problem, our long-standing problem of having too many mentally ill people in the criminal justice system, and particularly in jail, can be found right here in this report. The report that was authored by the committee that I chaired on the MHSOAC. This report, Together We Can, is a toolkit and a roadmap for how counties can work to solve this vexing problem. And the way we can do that is by collaborating with each other across departmental lines, with the public, with hospitals, with people from throughout our community, to recognize that all of us have a stake in this, and all of us need to be part of the solution. We are doing other things as well at the Sheriff's Office to work on this problem, one of which is working with the state hospitals to develop a program that would restore persons who are in our jail and are mentally ill to competency, and to do it in both in custody settings and in community settings. People who are languishing currently in our jail actually sometimes get worse instead of get better. They're waiting to go into state hospitals that are overcrowded and don't have room for them. We need to establish a program, and we're in discussions with the Department of State Hospitals to do just that. In addition to that, we need to recognize that community-based programs can keep people out of jail in the first place, and can have a better chance of restoring people to competency and getting them diverted from the system so that they never enter it. They never get charged criminally to begin with.
Thank you. And Lieutenant Chue.
So many committees throughout history talk about the problems, and they identify problems, but then they really don't accomplish anything. All the way back to JFK, he talked about the problems with the mental health system. And a lot of people are good intention talking about this, but there's no action. And our jails, there's 10 times more people in jail that are mentally ill than in state hospitals. 21% of our jail people have a serious mental health condition. So a sheriff, a law enforcement agency can't solve all of society's problems. So we do have to do this together, as the sheriff said, as a community. And we need to look at this. We can do a better job, and we need to focus on what we can do. And some of the things we can do is collaborate with probation and the public defender's office and the DA and various advocacy groups to get people out of the jail and have early intervention programs to identify people before they get into jail and get them into services. And I started a program, and we do just that. We identified about 900 people over the last 3 years, and we got over 100 people into services that probably wouldn't have gone into services with this program by collaborating.
Thank you. Our next question, we'll start with Sheriff Brown. And that question has to do with emergency preparedness. What is your view of how the sheriff operations during the Thomas Fire and the Montecito slide, particularly with respect to evacuations, and what lessons did you learn regarding future emergency preparedness?
Well, thank you, Shane. First of all, I just want to say that I'm exceedingly proud of the men and women of the Santa Barbara Sheriff's Office and how they acted during, before, during, and after the devastating debris flow in Montecito. They performed in a magnificent manner. With respect to evacuations, what we learned is that our capacity to conduct evacuations is severely strained. If we have a big event that's coming in, if we put too many people onto the evacuation process, we run the danger of not having enough people standing by to actually conduct rescues if and when an event occurs. We've also looked at our overall policy, our county's policy, all the different emergency agencies that come together in terms of evacuating people in both what we call the red zones and the yellow zones. The red zones are the extreme risk areas, and the yellow zones would be the high risk areas. Typically, the high risk areas would involve people being cut off, not able to traverse streets, having potential for the loss of utilities and so forth. And we recognize that although that's a significant problem, it's not as significant, obviously, as the potential for life-threatening activity that could occur if we have another major debris flow. So what we want to do, and what we have done, is recognize that we need to change a little bit who and where we were conducting the evacuations, and we've established a protocol that is working very well in that regard.
Thank you. Lieutenant Schway?
This was an unprecedented disaster, and my heart goes out to those people who lost loved ones and the homes. And as I'd like to echo Sheriff Brown, thanks to all the emergency workers, and also to the people in the road crews and in behavioral wellness and social services. One lesson we learned from this is that the community comes together in these emergencies. And I spent long days in the Emergency Operations Center, and I could see that everybody was doing their very best for the community. Other lessons learned, which is, I don't think it's much of a surprise, is communication can always be improved. You know, we need to improve communication better in this process to the public, and we also need to include people like homeowners associations, the Montecito Association, in the process of this type of emergency. And I would also like to see a public safety dispatch center, which would be like a regional center in our area, because there were call takers in different areas. There were call takers at the EOC, and there were call takers at dispatch, and I think that they should all be in one location.
Thank you. And Lieutenant Olmsted?
Thank you. I'd like to mimic what both Sheriff Brown and Lieutenant Schway said. The amount of work and the unbelievable work that the first responders, public works, and other people, citizens that helped with this disaster was unbelievable, and everyone did an excellent job. But we need to look at and understand how we came up with our decisions for evacuations, both during the Thomas Fire and also the debris flow. Frankly, we still haven't debriefed all of those exercises, and we need to conduct a debrief of everyone that was involved and make sure we learn from what our experience was. I think when it comes to evacuations, we need to take that very seriously and identify what the problem is and look at what the worst case scenario is and plan for the worst case scenario, but hope for the best. I think we could have made other decisions in our evacuation process, but also I think we could have repopulated people a little bit faster in the Thomas Fire. And I think just as important as to evacuate people, we need to repopulate people as soon as possible. We also need to work with the state and other county departments to refine our evacuation maps and make sure that we're evacuating people where it's needed to and not a whole area.
Thank you. That was it? Okay. Lieutenant Schway gets the next question, which is about Isla Vista. What are the top things that you would do to improve public safety in Isla Vista? And how will you interact with the Isla Vista Community Services District?
What a great group of kids out there, young men and women, actually. They, you know, the group out in Isla Vista, they have a lot of significant things to say. They're very intelligent. They're very organized, and like everything else, I would give the community a voice, and they deserve a voice in how we police. I think Isla Vista was one of the first community-oriented policing experiments in California, and we need to really embrace that. We need to embrace community-oriented policing out there. You need to have those relationships with the community, the people in the community to problem solve. And I have a lot of ideas for Isla Vista. I think that some of the events out there that cost taxpayers money, I think there's ways that we could move towards sanctioned events, which are funded and organized better. So I would like to work on that.
Lieutenant Olmsted, please.
Isla Vista is probably one of the most unique communities, at least in the state, if not the country. It's a community that has a lot of positive energy with the university students, but it's also a community that changes 25% of its community every single year. So you have to embrace that entire community and also sort of re-educate yourself with the community. I was lucky that I've been able to spend multiple rotations out there as a sergeant and as a lieutenant in charge of the Isla Vista Foot Patrol. And one of the goals I always had, and I believe that I was able to accomplish, was having a very good relationship with the students, with the associate students, and the other community members in Isla Vista. One of the things that I always encouraged and we worked towards was always trying to encourage and develop more positive events and a lot of daytime events, because at times Isla Vista is a different community, whether it's in the daytime or nighttime. And I think one of the big things we need to do is we need to use the energy with the students to develop more positive events and events that include everyone in the community.
Thank you.
Thank you. I would agree with both my challengers and what they said. Isla Vista is a unique community, certainly. And the people of Isla Vista are not just smart and they're not just organized, they're engaged. They are very aware of what's happening in their community, and they're very fiercely protective and concerned about it. And one of the things that I've done over the last several years is participate in a group called IV Safe. And IV Safe has brought together stakeholders from throughout the Isla Vista community, as well as organizations like the Sheriff's Office and the District Attorney's Office and other county and university-related organizations that have come about as a group and said, how can we work to make Isla Vista a safer and a better place? And we've had some tremendous successes. The reality is Isla Vista's problems are a shadow of what they have been in the past. If you look at the two big unsanctioned events, Halloween and Deltopia, that have occurred, the last few years there have been really very, very few problems. The arrests and the citations that have been issued have been a tiny fraction of what they were in the past. And it's important that this has come about as a team effort. It's come about as a result of the university, the county, and all of these people, including members of the Isla Vista district, coming together to work to provide some alternative activities to the unsanctioned event and to discourage outside people from coming into Isla Vista.
Okay. And I think Lieutenant Olmsted gets the next question, which is about immigration law enforcement and a so-called California Values Act, or SB 54. What is your position on cooperation with ICE, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Service, and particularly with enforcement of federal immigration laws, especially requests for detainers from ICE and notice of release date, and acceptance of federal Justice Department grants that require, I believe, the sheriff to sign off that you're in compliance with all federal laws?
So, as a whole, we need comprehensive immigration reform. And unfortunately, with federal law and state law, they've put law enforcement in the middle, and it risks community public safety. We need to work with both state law and federal law, and we got to abide by the laws. One of the things is, like you mentioned, we do receive various federal grants to protect the community, narcotics interdiction, human trafficking investigations, and we benefit very highly from it. So we still need to work with the federal government, but we also have to work with the state laws, and we need to be careful with state laws that limit our ability to protect the community. We need to enhance SB 54 where it allows us to go for the people that are violent offenders in the community. We need to, if there's an active warrant for someone, then we comply with that with the violent offenders that are federally wanted. We need to work with continuing looking out for federal grants, and recent decisions within the federal government allows us to continue receiving those grants, but abiding by state law.
Thank you. Sheriff?
Thank you. Well, immigration enforcement and immigration law are issues that are very emotive, they are very controversial, and they're very divisive within our community. And it's a sad state of affairs. And I agree with Brian that really we're in this situation because the federal government, our Congress, has failed to act to provide comprehensive immigration reform. The reality is we have an estimated 12 million or more people who are here that are undocumented, and it's unrealistic to think that we're going to be able somehow to deport 11 or 12 million people. It's just not going to happen, nor should it happen. The reality is most of those people are here living lives that are productive and living lives that, and being productive to our community. What we need to be concerned about are those undocumented persons who have come to our country and who are committing crimes, serious crimes against members of our community, more often than not against members of the immigrant community. And SB 54 is a law that is bad public policy. And as the president of the State Sheriff's Association, I was very front and center and vocal on this. And my personal feelings mirror the ones that are the State Sheriff's Association. We should not be providing sanctuary to criminals, people who commit crimes like assaulting a peace officer, serial crimes that do things that can really be a danger to others, or we shouldn't be releasing MS-13 gang members into the community.
Thank you. And, Lieutenant Sway.
I agree with some things that both my colleagues say. However, I do have a different view on SB 54. I don't think SB 54 lets dangerous people back into the community. I don't think it affects MS-13 gang members who are a serious threat to the community. And it allows for us to do business as usual with people that pose a significant threat to the community. We're talking about low-level misdemeanor offenders and people who, like the sheriff says, contribute to our communities. It's also about us not doing ICE's job. And we work in the criminal field. Immigration law is a civil law, so it's not, there are other laws on the book that clearly separate the criminal laws from the civil laws. And so it's really not a new concept. I think that we should let ICE do their job, and we should do our job and focus on our primary mission, which is protecting the public safety.
Thank you.
Could I have a follow-up to that?
We haven't been doing follow-ups. If you want to weave it into your closing, you could do that. I guess then the next question, which it goes to Sheriff Brown, it's about the Northern County Jail. What challenges does the county face in implementing the operation of the new Northern County Jail? What's your plan, and what's your plan for the existing jail?
Well, the challenges are extraordinary. To build a jail is probably the second most difficult construction project that one can have. Probably the arguably more difficult is building a hospital. But there are so many nuances about building a jail that our team that is working with the team from the county and from our contractors to make this a reality has overcome some incredibly complex issues and problems. And they're moving forward. The jail is more than 50% constructed, and it will actually be finished sometime in the spring of next year, and we plan to open it in the summer of next year. In terms of running two different jail facilities that are both fairly significant in size, it's going to have a series of challenges, but a series of benefits as well. The biggest benefit is it'll allow us to relieve a lot of the overcrowding that is occurring in our current jail. And it will allow us to have the opportunity to repurpose and to remodel some areas of that jail. Right now we have a 50-plus-year-old jail in certain parts that's a linear design. It's very antiquated. It's not a pleasant place to either be housed or to work in. And we are hoping to be able to add some medical and mental health type facilities into the jail to make it more humane. We're also hoping to add programming space that will allow us to continue to provide good programming to our inmates.
Thank you. Lieutenant Schway.
You know, the jail is funded through good planning with the Board of Supervisors and the Sheriff's Office, but I think at the expense of not having a specific vision on what to do with the South County Jail. And like the Sheriff says, it's an antiquated jail. You know, it's not set up for people with disabilities. You know, we need to start looking in the future on how we're going to fix that jail, because if we move almost 400 people from our South County Jail to the North County Jail, we're still going to have 500 or so folks in that jail, and it's in poor condition. It's in poor condition for employees that work there, and for the people that are housed in the jail. So we're going to have to look at ways to fund that, and look to the future to fix our jail in Santa Barbara.
Thank you. And Lieutenant Olmsted.
Thank you. So the issues we're going to have with the jail are staffing, hiring the custody deputies needed for it, the continued operating costs through the year with two jails, and then also the maintenance and remodel of the old jail. Recruiting and retention, we need to concentrate on identifying better ways to recruit people within the county. We have to do more outreach to the schools, all the way down to the high schools, to develop people into applying for the sheriff's office. Right now we have about 55 vacancies across our different jobs, including the deputy sheriffs, the custody deputies, dispatchers, and our office professionals. We need to develop a better way to recruit people. We need to offer recruitment bonuses both for prospective job applicants, but also our current employees to try to recruit people in. We need to improve employee wellness programs to keep employees longer rather than them retiring early or retiring a couple extra years earlier. With the finances, we need to identify ways to better be fiscally responsible. We have a $4.5 million overtime budget that it's been over budgeted by $4.5 million for the last 5 years. That's partially due to all our vacancies. We have to fill our vacancies so we can divert that money we're spending to other programs.
Thank you. I think we're ready for our next question, which is on community relations, particularly with the Latino communities in our county. How do you assess the Sheriff's Department relationship with the various Latino communities? Are there steps that you would take to improve them? And we will start with Lieutenant Schway.
We can always do better with community relations. And, you know, you hear from the public that they don't have a voice in how law enforcement is run. There's a fear of use of force throughout the nation, and you hear that. You know, you hear about unfair treatment, and I think that we need to have the courage to address and acknowledge that there is implicit bias, and we need to have better training programs that include implicit bias training. And with the crisis intervention training that I spearheaded, we do include aspects of implicit bias, and we're able to have volunteer psychologists who come up with programs and training for our officers on a regular basis. And now we just had one position that we believe is going to be funded for a full-time position, and that training is going to be a lot more robust for the Sheriff's Office.
Thank you. Lieutenant Olmsted.
Well, like Eddie said, we can always do better and improve our relationships with the community, and especially the Hispanic community. We need to do more outreach and have our deputies go out into the community. We have to have bilingual services. We have online reporting, but we need to encourage the bilingual online reporting so people can report crimes to us. We need to do, like I said earlier, more outreach in the schools to contact the Hispanic population. Have deputies go into the schools more, not just for the resource deputy position, but also go into classrooms and talk about law enforcement so they can bring the law enforcement story back to the rest of their family. We need to go and conduct surveys in the community. We've never conducted a survey to see what the community's problems are. A lot of times we think we know what the community problem is, but it might be something else. So we need to reach out and conduct surveys and talk to the community and have them give suggestions on what they perceive the issues are in the community.
Thank you. And Sheriff Brown.
You know, I think my two challengers have just expressed something that really is sort of an opinion that the glass is half empty. And I would submit the opposite. I would say optimistically that our relationship with the community, including the Latino community, is more than half full. It is an excellent working relationship. And I think that the majority of people in Santa Barbara County have a very favorable opinion of the Santa Barbara County Sheriff's Office and the men and women who work in it, as well they should. The service that is provided is second to none. And we do have a history of engaging with the community. I have had regular communications with POTR, with CAUSE. I have had, my office is open, people know that. I will meet with people and have met with people frequently to discuss issues. And some of the issues with respect to SB 54 have been there. I participated in a town hall meeting about it, so I've never been one at the top of the organization to try to dodge that. And I believe that the people that we serve are encouraged. The men and women of the Sheriff's Office operate under 5 guiding principles, our core values. And those are integrity and courage and service and fairness fairness, integrity, courage, service, and caring. And we are a caring organization. The reality is the Sheriff's Office is one of the finest law enforcement agencies, and I'm so proud of the men and women who work there because of the fact that they care so much about those they protect and serve.
Thank you. We'll go to our next question, which we will start with Lieutenant Olmsted, I believe. And it has to do with use of force policy. What is your position on the current debate regarding the standard for use of force by law enforcement officers?
Thanks. I think, like I said, law enforcement follows the laws of the land, and there's a Supreme Court decision, Graham versus Connor, that outlays out how use of force is interpreted with law enforcement. I think that the main thing when we look at use of force is identifying proper training to train law enforcement in the proper use of force. Unfortunately, a lot of times when budgets get cut, they cut the training bureau and cut training classes. And in these financial times, or when we're going over budget in other areas, we need to be more fiscally responsible, but we also need to make sure we offer training and identify proper police tactics to minimize that use of force. Use of force tactics are perishable skills, and by training on a regular basis, we'll be able to minimize our use of forces. like stated earlier, I've taught at the Law Enforcement Academy for 16 years, and a lot of the classes that I teach involves evaluating law enforcement tactics and minimizing that use of force to either no use of force or very limited use of force.
Thank you. Sheriff Brown.
The use of force by law enforcement officers is a necessary, but in some cases very ugly appearing phenomenon. And there's no way to make the use of force look pretty or look nice. And with the advent of cell phone cameras, security cameras, surveillance cameras, there are more and more instances where law enforcement officers' use of force is coming into play. But the image that's given by many of those videos is a one-dimensional image. It doesn't give the entire story about what happened. And it's important that we not hamstring our law enforcement officers by passing laws which will make them hesitate or make them reluctant to use force if force is justified and necessary. And unfortunately, we have some bills that are working their way through the state legislature right now that would do just that. That would change the time-honored court decision that says use of force, particularly deadly force, has to be used, and it has to be viewed through the lens of a reasonable officer in the same circumstances. And my concern is that we're going to pass laws which will take into effect 20/20 hindsight that's not there for that split second that a law enforcement officer has to make a decision on whether he or she will utilize deadly force. The law that is proposed would require that all other options be exhausted before the use of deadly force would apply. And that's just unrealistic in many situations.
Thank you. And Lieutenant Chue.
So use of force. I co-wrote the arrest and control manual for the regional academy, and it's used in three different counties still. And so I was a use of force instructor, a force options instructor, and arrest control instructor. And so this is very near and dear to me, and I've looked at this a lot. Brian talked about Graham versus Connor, which is a reasonable officer. Comes from an older civil law about a reasonable quality of care. And so that part of the law has to remain in effect. I actually read the assembly bill on the law changes, and the way I read it, it didn't change that law. It changed it slightly. I think there still needs to be some work on it. But you know, we need to also look at embedding de-escalation training into use of force training. So de-escalation training is slowing things down and trying to slow it down when you can to make better decisions and use better force options. So I think we have to be open to at least looking at this.
The next question, we'll start with Sheriff Brown, and it's about marijuana. What challenges does the legalization of marijuana present for law enforcement, particularly the sheriffs?
Well, there are huge challenges that legalized marijuana presents us with in law enforcement and presents us with as a community. The reality is this is a substance that does have some negative consequences and effects. We have a lot of concerns about the impact on our young people, for example, their access to what would be otherwise legal marijuana if it's in the home and is there in the possession of a parent or a guardian. There are issues about consistency. There are, in terms of edibles and in terms of the actual potency of marijuana that is offered. There are a lot of regulations and a lot of rules that have been established, but it is a convoluted and excruciatingly drawn-out process that is occurring. And really, the only really good thing that I see on the horizon as a result of legalized marijuana is the tax that will occur on that marijuana that will allow us to provide appropriate enforcement and regulatory activity that is going to be essential if there's going to be a successful stream of revenue that comes from it. We've been all told that this is the sort of the salvation of the future. And nobody seems to know. The estimate in our county is between 5 and 25 million in revenue. That's a huge spread. But the reality is if there's a significant black market It's going to drive the prices down, and we won't see a significant amount of tax revenues.
Thank you. Lieutenant and Lieutenant Quinn.
I agree with much of what Sheriff Brown says, especially with the children. That's something that we really need to look at, because kids will have more access to this. There is more good news, though, and the good news is the money, as the sheriff talks about, the revenues. So there'll be money to enforce the regulations. The other thing I see is that the regulations could make this more healthier. So to reduce the pesticides and the different chemicals that are in marijuana to make it healthier for the community. There's a lot to figure out, but the other good news is that the government's figuring this out faster than I thought it would. I mean, the feds are looking like they're going to back off on California, and California's looking at a centralized bank to handle the money aspect of it, which would have been a nightmare with having so much cash at these places. And the other thing is that I think there's about 16 other states that have done this before us. And so we can look at best practices at other states and see how they addressed DUI enforcement with marijuana, which is a huge concern, and how they address the marijuana access to kids.
Thank you. Lieutenant Olmsted.
Thanks. So when the proposition passed about a year and a half ago, I formed the first county committee to address the legalization, the recreational use of marijuana. And through that meeting, we developed the Cannabis Ad Hoc Committee, which eventually developed the ordinance that we've been going through to manage the recreational and the licensing of the cannabis industry. Like my two opponents said, it's going to heavily impact law enforcement and potentially impact the community. We have to ensure that cannabis stays out of the reach of our youth. We also have to make sure that there's enforcement to ensure that the black market growers, the people that do not have licenses, stay out of the market, like the sheriff described. Through this year-and-a-half process, we've developed a plan through the development of the ordinance that where the sheriff's office will have a cannabis compliance team that will go out and ensure that the people that receive the licensing are operating within the license, the county ordinance, but also we have enough investigators that can go out and address the illegal side of the cannabis growing and keep it out of the hands of youth and educate people on driving and the safe handling of it.
Thank you. I think we can probably get one more question in before the closing statements, and we'll start with Lieutenant Shui, and this is about overtime reduction, which I think some folks have touched on. Reportedly, because of chronic recruiting and retention issues, the department is suffering major overtime costs, as has been reported in papers. What's your plan to reduce overtime in the department, both in the short term and in the long term?
Well, you know, the undersheriff came up with this plan of showing how having a fully staffed department can reduce overtime, and it's a good plan, and it appears to be working. I think that we would continue moving forward with that to get more of our personnel up to staffing. I know we have over 55 positions that are open. Not all are deputy sheriff's positions, but we have 55 positions to fill. So, you know, once we have enough positions, we can reduce overtime, but we have to keep those people. And you know, the last few, from 2009 to present, we've lost about 120 employees. And in 2017, you know, we lost a significant number of employees, and 75% of the people we lost were non-retirees that went to other agencies. So we do have to work on the retention issues with our department as well.
Thank you.
So, like you said, it was stated that we have a very over-budgeted overtime, and we need to address that by filling our vacancies. Like Eddie said, that if the department's staffed, then we're not backfilling behind these vacancies. We have to address it with both the retention side and the recruitment side. The retention side is we have to develop an employee wellness program that addresses both the physical side and the mental health side of our employees. We need to encourage them to be healthy, and they will stay longer. And if we take suggestions from them and improve the morale of the agency, more people will stay. On the recruiting side, we need to recruit from the county and go to the schools, all the way down to the high schools, and that's a long-term investment. But we need to recruit from inside the county. If we recruit from outside the county, then we have a risk of people leaving our department to go back to where they grew up and go back to another agency. So we have to really recruit, and it's a long-term investment of 5 to 10 years. And as soon as we fill those vacancies, then we'll minimize our overtime. Plus, we also need to work with the Board of Supervisors to fund additional positions so we have a relief factor.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I'd like to just correct one thing that Eddie said that is not correct, and that is the total number of separations that we had in 2017 was 45. But of those 45, 27 of those were retirements of sworn personnel. And we actually had a total of 18 sworn non-retirement separations. And of those, 13 of those, or 72% of the 18, went to another agency. So it's not a significantly high number. These are numbers that are very consistent with other sheriff's offices. In terms of the overtime issue, as mentioned, we have a plan that's been put into place, and we call it the Santa Maria experiment. And what we did is we took a station, Santa Maria, that was the only station in which we didn't have a contract city. So in other words, all of the sworn officers, peace officers that worked out of that facility were working in a way that we could track their overtime not related to a contract. And what we did was we purposely upstaffed that station to see if we could reduce significantly the use of overtime if there was adequate staffing. And we proved that that could happen. And we incorporated that into our budget workshop, and we presented that to the Board of Supervisors. And I'm optimistic and confident that there's going to be some additional funding that's going to come our way to allow us to expand this throughout the organization.
Thank you. See, we got one more question in, and it's about mass shootings. And the question, and we start with, I believe, Lieutenant Olmsted. What's the best way to keep our schools and other public places safe from mass shootings? What's the best that we can do, and what advice do you give to people about how staying safe?
By far, the best way to prevent mass shootings is early intervention and identifying people that have mental illnesses or that are in crisis to identify and get them help early on. But if we can't get that early intervention, we also need to have protocols and procedures that, safety procedures and security procedures that the schools can provide for a safer location. Unfortunately, schools, or primarily schools, or other areas that these mass shootings have happened, they're not designed as an airport to keep weapons out. They're designed to move people in and out with very few minutes, like us, in between classes. So it's very hard to increase the security of our schools in our community or other business locations. The other side is to train staff, both in the schools and other locations, in these active shooter type incidents, and also train law enforcement, continue training. And we've been doing that for the last 15 years or more, training in active shooters and mass shootings and the responses to it. And we've included working with other first responders, with EMS and also the fire department, to improve our responses and minimize the deaths that are associated with the injuries from mass shootings.
Thank you. Sheriff Brown?
Well, certainly the best way that we can serve the public in this terrible area is to prevent mass shootings by utilizing the intelligence process. We have to make sure that our intelligence gathering capabilities are up to speed. We have to make sure that the public is aware that they have a need to report to law enforcement anything that appears to be a threat or appears to be a danger in terms of our schools in particular. And we need to diligently follow up on that. If and when we find someone who is of concern to us, we need to utilize the full array of tools that we have as law enforcement officers. And that could be everything from checking their criminal histories to making contact with that person. If we determine that they have firearms and we believe they're a threat, we can utilize gun violence restraining orders. There are many things that we can do. But it's also important that we recognize that not everybody that's been involved in these terrible crimes across our country has telegraphed ahead of time that they were going to do this. And we have to be able to react rapidly and effectively if and when we have an incident like this. And we do two things to make sure that happens. We have school resource deputies in many of our schools throughout the community that are on campus and immediately available, that if there's an incident, they can respond and protect students. They also have tremendous amount of collateral good that they do, and their primary function is good. We also need to make sure that we, and I'm out of time.
One thing I'd like to clarify is that not all people who have a mental illness are dangerous. As a matter of fact, many of them are more in more danger of being victimized. And only if somebody is suffering from a mental health crisis is only about 4% more likely to commit a violent act. If they use substance, if they're a substance abuse user, it's like 7 or 8% more likely to be violent. So one thing that we can do, like Brian and the sheriff were talking about, was training, of course. Also in the schools, there's different types of training. We have the active shooter that we train, and then there's a run, hide, fight model that is taught in the schools to teach kids to, basically you want to run away from if you're hearing something going on, you don't want to sit in place, because studies have shown that that's where bad things happen. And we've had more than one mass shooting in our county, and intelligence is very important. Gun violence restraining orders are very important. I believe in reasonable gun control and taking guns from people who are not capable of having those firearms and shouldn't have those firearms.
Thank you. That was our last question. We will have our candidates now ask up to a minute for the closing statement. We are running pretty short on time, so start with Lieutenant Olmsted.
Thank you to the League of Women Voters and TV Santa Barbara for hosting this forum. It's time for a new leader in the Sheriff's Office, and that leader is me. The Deputy Sheriff's Association, Santa Barbara City Police and Fire Association, Santa Maria Police Officers Association, and Tri-County PORAC has all endorsed me for sheriff. These are the men and women who respond to you during time of need, and now they need your help in picking a new sheriff. Trust their decision and who they think should be sheriff. Supervisor Joan Hartman and Peter Adam of the Board of Supervisors and Santa Barbara City Council member and soon to be elected Greg Hart have also endorsed me for sheriff and decided I am the person that they want to work with. These are the individuals who will making decisions in funding the sheriff's office properly. Please follow their lead and their confidence in my leadership and abilities to form excellent relationships with other agencies and the community. The Santa Barbara Sheriff's Office needs a new sheriff with a new direction. I ask that you support me for sheriff and vote for me June 5th.
Thank you. Go with Lieutenant Sway.
I want to echo the thanks to the League and to the TV station and the folks at home. This election is a true opportunity for real change. I'm the only candidate with progressive values, and these values make me who I am and how I see our community. As sheriff, I'll institute community policing, where deputies are seen and interact with their communities. Proper training for our deputies in areas such as mental health, education, de-escalation techniques, and acknowledging implicit bias, and respect and support for our diverse communities. We can save taxpayer monies by providing the support folks need to reclaim their lives and contribute to our community. It's also the right thing to do. We can and will work together towards making our communities stronger and safer. My name is Eddie Shway, and I believe in the strength of Santa Barbara, and I humbly ask for your vote.
Thank you. And Sheriff Bill Brown.
Thank you, and I echo thanks to the League and TV Santa Barbara. Being sheriff isn't an easy job. Leadership is not a popularity contest. And although I love the men and women of the Santa Barbara County Sheriff's Office like a second family, my views and decisions as sheriff are not always aligned with the desires of the union or the Board of Supervisors. I am an independently elected official who represents all the people of Santa Barbara County. For 11 years, I've worked hard to be everyone's sheriff. Despite unprecedented and overwhelming fiscal challenges, including the loss of 90 general fund positions since 2008, I have restructured the Sheriff's Office so that essential frontline services are still being provided and being provided in an exemplary manner. Whether responding to crisis or to everyday challenges, the dedicated men and women of the Santa Barbara Sheriff's Office, under my leadership, keep our county safe. On June 5th, I ask for your vote so that I can continue leading your Sheriff's Office in the right direction.
Thank you. Thanks to our candidates for participating, and thank you for your service. It's appreciated. Remember that you can't vote unless you register to vote. Register properly. The ballots have been mailed. State and county ballots have been mailed. Last day to vote is Election Day. Please register and vote. Together we can make democracy work. Thank you.